they don't wake up every day thinking about how are they going to mess with this person and that person. They just want to get to, these guys are, guys and girls are people with families and kids, and they have normal lives. They don't sleep at the police station and think about how they're going to wake up and mess with people all day. Their intent is to do their job well and to protect the community.
Welcome to Breaking Stereotypes with Todd and Tootsie. Today we're joined by Chuck Corhair, a newly retired police officer who served 27 years on the force. Today, Chuck will attempt to break the stereotype that many people have when they think about cops. But before we get started, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to see more in-depth interviews that break stereotypes. All right, so welcome, Chuck. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, welcome to our podcast. It's going to be fun.
So why don't we start by asking you what you think the stereotypes are of cops?
I think it depends on where you're from. So I know where I worked, the suburbans, or suburban town, we were very well liked and appreciated. So I didn't get the hate that some of the more urban areas are getting, especially my area. Now it's been 2 years since I retired. So before the COVID lockdowns, before George Floyd and the BLM riots and things like that, I got out just before all that stuff. So my whole time, I actually had it easy compared to the guys now. I felt appreciated, but I think the guys that work in the more urban areas are looked at as, the word racist comes up a lot, and heavy-handed, and not very compassionate. And I think, by the way, those are unfair, but that's the stereotype.
Yeah.
Tell us about unfair. Why do you think that is?
Well, because I know these guys personally. They got into the job. They don't wake up every day thinking about how are they going to mess with this person and that person. They just want to get to, these guys are, guys and girls are people with families and kids, and they have normal lives. They don't sleep at the police station and think about how they're going to wake up and mess with people all day. Their intent is to do their job well and to protect the community.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the job itself from your perspective, telling us what some of the day-to-day stressors are.
So where I was working, we a lot of the more common stressful calls would be domestic stuff. That was almost a daily thing.
Could you give us a little bit of a, garden variety situation without, disclosing anybody's names?
You might have a couple going through a divorce and a custody issue, and those get really, really ugly. Or you might have to go and she went to family court to get an order of protection. Stay away order of protection. They both live in the same house. He's paying, mortgage is in or rent is in his name, all this stuff, and he'll argue with you. And he thinks it's unfair that he's got to get kicked out, and some of them are a little bit resistant, and you got to talk to him and say, hey, you'll have your day in court and this and that, and he's got to grab his toothbrush and some clothes, and he's out of there. He's on his friend's couch. So, but those can get volatile. Obviously, the guy doesn't want to leave.
Sure.
And
is it most of the time that the guy ends up leaving?
It seemed like it. Yeah, because those are the when people go to family court, they're hearing the one side of the story.
Sure.
And a lot of times they're justified. More times than not, she's going there for a good reason. But sometimes not. It's not that way. But either way, there's a removal, and it blows the guy's mind that he has to leave his house. In his mind, his house.
Sure.
Even though everything might be in his name, you got to go. You know what I mean? So, those are the situations they're like powder keg situations. And you got it's so emotional because you have the kids involved, and they loved each other at least at one time. So it's a very highly emotional thing that can go. It's a powder keg, So
and you're walking into that,
You're walking into that, and of course you're never alone on something like that. You go in with another guy, but or girl, But
what was the primary reason for that? Was it more just kind of protection
For
or
removal?
show of force, or just
Oh, for protection, just because I said, because such a powder keg, you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be there by yourself. You know what I mean? You got to have backup on any sort of domestic violence thing. We
Okay.
always had two people.
You told us once that, when you're a cop, it's pretty much like it's always bad news for the other people, right? Like
Yeah, they
no
don't-
one's seeing the cops for a good reason.
Right.
So it's-
Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, they're not calling you because they're having a good day.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It's always either you could be the fender bender at the parking lot, or it could be a full blown domestic. It could be you could be going to a suicidal person. I mean, but there's some sort of scale of a level of negativity. So I know,
Yeah.
and I that probably wears down on a lot of guys. You don't really feel it, I think, because it's just your job every day in and day out. But I know that almost as soon as I walked out the door when I retired, you could almost feel it wash off of you. You know what I mean? So it might be
just that you didn't have that responsibility anymore, as
Just
far
that-
as
that you
you had to
didn't-
be
yeah.
involved in that type of thing.
right, and it made me realize that I think a lot of guys and girls are living at the. It's almost like being an alcoholic, being a .10 all the time. You don't realize you're drunk. This is your normal, and so I think a lot of people, their stress is up at that high, also, and they just live with it, and this is their normal. So when I walked out the door, you feel that wash off of you. So, and I'm like, what's all the stress coming from? I worked out in the suburbs. We had very violent incidents from time to time, but it wasn't every single day. And I think it's the accumulation, just negativity, day in and day out. You know what I mean?
So would you say that in a more urban environment, it's going to be increased, and,
Oh,
and
big.
therefore, the individual officers are going to have, much higher stress levels just
I
because
would
they have
think
to do that?
They would have to, yeah.
And so,
Just day in and the ultra violent stuff, and the calls that we would go to and make it there in 4 minutes, a non-emergency call, it might be 8 hours before they get to it. Someone broke into your house and you need a report. It might be 8 hours before they get to you because they're taking in progress stuff.
Sure.
And they're running one to the other. They don't eat lunch. They're going. I call it a slave to the radio. They just one call to the next. 10 jobs backed up. So
absolutely.
yeah.
So if you're in such a negative space all the time, and it's like I've had jobs where you have a bad day once in a while,
Yeah.
or but if you're a cop and every day there's somebody's worst day, and it's happening over and over again, doesn't that affect your mental health and your whole outlook on the world?
It must. It probably does. But you just don't feel it. It's hard to explain. I didn't feel that depressed, I didn't realize it, I guess, at the time that there was that level of stress, and I was lucky enough to have a supportive family and all this to go home to.
Sure.
But I would imagine other guys it probably wears down on,
Do you think that's why in the cases where there are some issues with police officers that maybe they snapped versus it's who they are
No,
inherently?
yeah, I
or
think
do
you can become a completely different person. They're very cynical, and I think if you can, that can happen.
Have you seen it happen?
I guess so. Yeah, I could see guys that are just cynical and don't like, they get a little bit antisocial. Their only friends are other cops, and they kind of get into that world, So yeah, I would say so, that they're standoffish with non-police officers.
Yeah,
in
I
their
could
personal life or in professional life.
Yeah, I could see where that might make you have a mistrust of people if you're always seeing people that are kind of
At their worst.
at their worst.
At their
Right.
worst, and just how ugly people can be to each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess me personally, I was able to separate the job from, I had a social life outside the, other than police officers, and like I said, it's very supportive coming home, and so I feel like I was able to separate that pretty well. Maybe not always, but sometimes my wife knew. I asked her not to, what happened today? You know, sometimes you're like, I just don't want to, you know, you don't want to talk about it.
Sure.
Relive some of the stuff that went on. So, you know, so.
Well, I think another potential stressor, just thinking about it, would be, you know, that especially in where you worked, is that kind of feast or famine type deal, right? Where sometimes you might not, you'd be bored out of your skull, like if it's 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter,
Yeah.
right? And nothing's going on, and then all of a sudden you get this call, and like you respond to a completed suicide or
Yeah,
something
guys,
like that.
guys in a house with a gun, you know, kind of thing. Barricaded gunman, we call 'em. Yeah, it can go from 0 to 100 really quick.
Yeah. So what was that like? Like when would you, in those times that were kind of boring, would you relish that, or would you get like antsy that you wanted some action to happen?
No,
or
no, no.
something?
I would. Well, it depends on what part of my career. At the beginning, I would want something to happen.
Okay.
You know, or you try to make it happen. You're making traffic stops on anything that moves. You know, but
Okay.
Towards it, there was a part in my career
See,
though that
I gotta come in right now because that's such a cop stereotype,
Yeah.
right? Like that you're looking for reasons to
Yeah.
arrest guys. I
But
mean,
it makes sense though. If you're bored,
Well,
you know,
here's the other thing though. When anytime there's a crime occurring, or usually it involves a vehicle at some point. So if the guy's driving around at 2 in the morning, there's an old saying: "These cops are criminals out at 2 in the morning." What's this guy doing? You know, it could be the guy delivering the newspapers, or it could be, you know, what's he doing? You know, is he been drinking? Is he breaking into cars? That was another huge thing in Webster. Was, you know, every year from my first day all the way to my last day, people break into cars at night. People, and when I say break in, people leave their doors unlocked and their cars get rifled through. And sometimes walls get guns go. They leave their car keys in there to save them a step in the morning. Now their car is gone.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff happened at night.
I know
so,
you think you're safe, right? But then so you overcompensate by doing nothing. It happened to a mutual friend of ours, didn't it?
Yeah.
At one point,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
left his wallet. In
I
his
actually
car.
I was like, who are these people that leave a wallet and a gun and their keys in the car? That's how you
work
kind of.
computer, and he left everything in there.
Yeah. He left it unlocked.
And he's lucky
Yeah.
that the guys got caught, actually.
Yeah.
There were that day. But and then it turned into a paperwork nightmare because they had hit, you know, 20 different cars. Now you got all this property. You got to sort out whose is whose. And,
Yeah.
But yeah. So when you're pulling, you're not breaking people's balls or trying to stay busy. You know, from being bored. There's a legitimate reason to pull people over. Like I said, sometimes at some point during the crime, a vehicle was involved. Most of the time. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So.
Yeah. And then you can always run their
Yeah,
place
sometime-
right to,
yeah.
you know, to figure out if they have a record or
Record,
you know, whatever.
warrants,
or
things
warrants.
like that. You know, are you driving? Is your license valid? You know. So,
Yeah.
and could be some poor guy just coming home from work. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And have a nice night. You know what I mean? So,
I know you've seen some pretty ugly things over the years. Did you become desensitized to a lot of the?
probably. Yeah. You know, you would see like someone commit suicide using a gun. That can be pretty graphic. And you kind of go in there. You don't really. You're not really overwhelmed by that. It's a very matter of fact thing. Which.
Do you remember the first time you saw something like that? Like, I remember when we were kids, we were in the police explorers together, and we had to go down to like the morgue and things like that.
Yeah.
But you know, like when you were a young cop and you walked into your first scene, it was really like that. What was?
I guess it might have been a little bit shocking, but you know, you're especially as a young guy, you want to do everything right. You want to make sure you're doing your job right. So you're sort of in a different context. Okay, I gotta find out what happened. When's the last time somebody saw him? You know, we got to notify family members. Is there any suicide note? Is there any sign of foul play? You know,
Yeah.
was this a suicide? You know,
Yeah.
You call in techs in to take pictures, and you got to call the ME's office to come pick them up and notify family members and
Yeah.
figure out what happened. You know,
That
so-
part of it must have been horrible, notifying the
Yeah.
family
Oh,
members.
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what those experiences were like?
Those were always sad. So if there was any point where you kind of get emotional and choked up, it would always be seeing their reaction. You know, especially if it's kind of an unexpected thing, you know, and they would be shocked and so that was, if you got choked up at all, it'd be probably something like that. But so that would be the hardest part, doing the notifies or just seeing their reaction. They might be the one that called you, and you hear them crying and screaming, and they're calling family members on the phone in the next room, and it's pretty emotional.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
And it's weird. It sounds like just the amount of different emotions and the mental toll, because on the one hand, so you go in and you see this gruesome scene,
Yeah.
then you're going into job mode where you're like, I got to do this, that,
Yeah.
and take, and that, but at the same time, then you have to have this emotional empathy piece,
Got to have the empathy.
right? It's kind of a tall order.
It is.
Yeah, it's
It
a
is,
lot to
so that-
expect from one human being.
Mhm.
You know, in that service. And I know that you're a very empathetic person, and so I'm sure you were when it came to those notifications and things like that. As kind as possible, and but it's one of those things where I'm wondering if maybe other cops you worked with, or just situations that were similar, because of the fact that maybe they're kind of burned out or something, that they don't have the kind of the soft kind of approach that you did.
Yeah,
in a lot
I
of
guess
ways.
I don't recall anything being like anyone being out of line, but
Not
that
necessarily
could
out
be a
of
little
line,
more matter.
but-
I could
yeah.
remember, maybe being a little matter of fact with people, and but I don't know. I guess I again, us guys in the suburbs was a little bit, I never worked too much with the urban environment, how guys responded to stuff like that. But I think for the most part, the guys I worked with were pretty empathetic towards family members and things.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So, again, that's something that you would hope would be happening, but at the same time, it's nice to hear that that's your
Right.
has
Yeah.
been your
And
experience.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not the first thing people think of when they think of cops. is
Right,
that-
and
that
insensitive
piece.
and-
yeah,
yeah.
right.
Yep.
So I want to talk a little bit about the uniform and sort of the power that comes with being a cop, because I think, obviously you put all that on. Now you got the badge and the gun and the baton and just, it's a whole getup. And is it possible to not power trip when you have that?
I think so. You get used to that.
Yeah?
You're used to strapping all that. And people are like, oh, how do you, all the weight that's on your belt and stuff, the bulletproof vest. And now they really look, since I've left, they have these what they call outer carriers, so the vest is on the outside,
Okay.
which was I wish we had then, because when you're in there doing paperwork, you take it off and you put it aside. Now it's a lot more comfortable, But it does look, it can look, I guess, a little bit intimidating to some people.
Sure.
But,
Well, I mean, essentially, you're kind of a soldier, and everybody else is
Yeah.
a civilian, right?
But
as
it's
far as the way you present yourself.
Yeah, and you want to look, and that's why you want to not go in looking sloppily. You
Sure.
want your shoes polished, and you want your uniform looking clean, and you don't want the donut powder all over there. Don't get powdered donuts, because it doesn't come out of the. You just wipe it off and it rubs it in there.
They
But,
tell you that on the first day.
Yeah, I know you figured it out the hard way, really. I did anyway. But there is, you get used to it, and you don't realize people. That is one of people respond to that,
Sure.
and look at you as an authority figure, and you can pull somebody over and they're shaking. They're shaking when they hand you their information and stuff. So it's an intimidating thing. I didn't realize. That came most clear to me after I retired, and now I'm working at a school district as a security guard. I'm just wearing a polo shirt, some BDUs, nothing, and you're trying to direct traffic, and people, no, I think I'm gonna go over there. Nobody listens to you. Nobody and that was like the first day. Nobody. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right, and you're trying to now you're custom. You don't want to make anyone mad, so you're trying to accommodate the person.
Right.
Say, I'm
Sure.
going to just stay right here.
Yeah.
So when you actually put it on and you would go out into the public, would you kind of have this? Again, I know you said you kind of felt get used to it, but was it like a professional, kind of version of yourself, as far as, versus like if you were off, for example, and you were just wearing street clothes,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you put this on, and like, was there like a mental state change?
I think probably a little bit. And you go into a situation, you got to be respectful when you're in somebody's house, but you also want them to know that you're in control of the situation, And that, right, and I think just how you carry yourself can convey that. You know what I mean? And you got to be confident, and look good in your uniform and all this, and it just conveys this guy's got some confidence, he's squared away, and people respond to that. So.
Well, and I would think, it's kind of wherever you go as a cop when you're going into businesses and things like that. I mean, free cup of coffee, free meal, kind of you get. So on the one hand, you have this super positive reaction to it and, this deference to your authority. And on the other hand, I could see how easily that the wrong person could really take advantage of
if they've had
it.
especially if they've had a negative experience. You're the next guy that comes now you're the next guy that came after his negative experience, and he's going to think you're the same way, because we're all in the same uniform.
Sure.
The people don't see the individual, they see the uniform.
Right.
So you're and that goes for, I think, female, or it doesn't matter what race you are and everything. Once if you got the uniform on, you're a police officer.
Sure.
Right.
And so people are going to respond to the uniform.
Right.
And
that's where one bad apple gives everybody the same kind of bad name, right?
Right. You might come in there and now you got, okay, this guy's negative, and he doesn't like the police, and so you don't take it personal. Try to work with the guy and not get back in his face. Try to be nice. Sometimes you walk away shaking their hand. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So.
Well, you're not clean cut now.
No,
So.
far from. I haven't stepped in I've had the beard trimmed a couple times, but this hasn't been cut since I left. And
Is that on purpose because you're sort of rebelling
Freedom.
against that?
maybe it's my whole life clean cut. That 27 years of police officer, and then having a dad that said, "Cut that hair." Now I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Do you see a lot of other, retired cops letting it all out?
Not really. But everyone grows a beard. But nowadays, again, since I left, you'll notice they're allowed to keep a beard now. That's new. That's after I left. We were able to do it like no shave November. Like my last couple of years, they let us do no shave November. But then it had to be neat and like
Sure.
And so you'll see now though, guys are wearing beards now. And that's new. But yeah, I think at first, maybe their first couple months they grow it off, but then it turns into a hassle. And most guys look the same that I've noticed as they did when they retired. So.
Okay, interesting. Well, it's something that I'm wondering if that policy is to try to have people be able to look at cops in a different view, that they're also people. Rather than having to be that militaristic look.
I did see an article. I think it was out of Seneca Falls or something. I forgot the police chief that was going to try that, and he called it more approachable. So maybe that's the strategy behind it. More approachable. So.
Sure. Well, I think it, especially as our culture is definitely grown towards more facial hair, has definitely been in for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a COVID thing or what, but
I don't know. But it's definitely shifted in our culture, and so it's something that I've kind of fought. But it's something that
you had a beard though at one time.
Yeah, for a short period of time, but it was nothing. It never really stuck. But it's something that again, I think that if the culture kind of moves in this one direction, but the police are still like the Yankees, it's going to be one of those things where it's going to create that divide more. So, and I know in the military they've done that as well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, with certain, I think depending on deployments and MOSs and things like that, guys can have facial hair. Definitely like the SEALs, especially in the Middle East, have been able to.
Yeah, you want
wear
to blend
them.
in the population out over there's got beards. So
Yeah. So I think that's something that is kind of evolving with the times. But like you said, for your 27-year career, that was not really a thing.
No.
Nope. And so
it was frustrating too, because sometimes other parts of the country, you would see like a cop's episode or some guys had goatees, or I'm like, why can't we do that? But we were, for the longest time, I called it we're stuck in the 50s.
Tootsie and I talked about prior to this in our planning was that oftentimes cops get into these what we call no-win situations, and so one example we thought of is, what if you pulled over a friend who was drunk, for example, and it was obvious that they were intoxicated. And so you have, on one hand, you have this allegiance to a lifelong friend potentially, and on the other hand, you got a job to do. And so, like, had you had experiences that were kind of no-win like that? And, and kind of how did you navigate that?
I can't recall pulling somebody over that I knew, that was drunk and all that. But had I done it, I'll be honest with you, I'd get him a ride home. If I pulled over a friend of mine, I'd get him a ride home. Give him a pass. Now, if it became a habit, then it's every time. Now this guy's going to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Now, and am I calling another officer? Hey, can you handle this? You know what I mean? But yeah. I would. Frankly, I'd get him a ride home. So
yeah. Okay.
Not everyone wants to hear that, but that's
no, I really appreciate your honesty because I think it's one of those things where the reality of that's just human nature that you have this connection with this person. It's just not somebody Joe Schmo off the street. It's somebody that and you're not going to want to hurt them. But it also makes sense that if all of a sudden, every week it's happening, then it's, it ends up being a public safety issue.
Then somebody's going to get hurt, and then how do you forgive yourself if you hit somebody or kill somebody? So. Yeah.
So what if you saw a cop in a situation doing something that he wasn't supposed to be doing?
Well, then you have to intervene. And they're actually working on making legislation on that. I don't know if legislation is the right word. I know the police departments are having policies. And it might come down to legislation, but they want to start, they call it the obligation to intervene, I think, something along those lines. You're obligated, and if you don't intervene, there's going to be consequences for you too. So that's a thing that started. But before that, I think again, I can't think of an example where I saw somebody doing something they really shouldn't.
Well, how about the super obvious one is that the cops are, like, let's be honest, like, allowed to speed.
Yeah.
So if you pull someone over and they flash their badge,
have a nice day, sir.
Right? And so
at least here, I've heard there's other parts of the country where they don't do that, but around here, yeah. Now, again,
is it a degree though? So if somebody's going 120, well, would you just, would that mandate a ticket?
That would, if someone was doing that, their supervisor would get called, even if they're off duty or they're on their way into work. Something that reckless, would definitely generate a call to the supervisor. Okay. You can't go through. It's almost an offense if you're driving through our town, our jurisdiction, like a maniac. It's very disrespectful. So, we've had. I can't think. I know that I can't think of a specific example, but that's happened before. And a supervisor will call their supervisor and let them know what's going on.
Okay.
Didn't get a ticket, of course, but
right.
Yeah, you squashed that. You don't drive reckless through our town, and we wouldn't do it through their town.
Sure.
So
I know things are changing, and you've kind of pointed out some of the legislation, but isn't there still that blue wall that makes it really like? Do you think that's going to work? I mean, do you think cops are going to be reporting on themselves?
I think so. I think so because you could get jammed up now. You know what I mean? So if nothing else, self-preservation, not necessarily because it's the right thing to do, but self-preservation. And, this is your excuse. This is why I had to say something to a boss or to something because now it's not like, what'd you do that for?
Sure.
I'm obligated. I'm not getting jammed up. I'm not losing my job because of you.
Okay.
Kind of a thing. So it's almost an excuse to intervene. You know what I mean? Because you're obligated to now.
Yeah.
That's the rules. You have to do it.
Yeah. It's like calling your wife up at the car dealership and saying to the guy, the salesman, like, I gotta talk to my wife before I can make this deal.
Yeah.
Right. It's that same type of thing that you kind of, that would make sense that you would use that as a reason, to to report them.
So now you're not being a rat or anything. You're
Yeah.
doing. I'm not putting I got a family. I need it. I'm 5 years away from my pension. You're
Yeah.
not going to screw that up.
Gotcha.
Do you think that's a response, though, to a lot of the, I hate to use the word corruption because it's a strong word, but, that has gone on?
Well,
that's gone unchecked.
There's always been pressure to not to be a team player, I guess. And like you said, the thin blue wall, there's always been that social, that's the norm. You know what I mean? But what did we see with the whole George Floyd thing? There were guys that maybe they could have stepped in and said, he can't breathe. Or I don't know. 'Cause I didn't really follow that. It was so cringy for me that I didn't really follow the whole thing. So, but it sounds like he might have been, guys standing around might have been able to say, hey, let him up.
Yeah.
So.
But we kind of talked about that today, and we were saying how, so one of the cops in that situation, it was like his first day on the job, and you've got the guy who's 20 years your senior, and I think, again, that's one of those situations where he probably didn't, because he felt like, I'm overruled by this guy, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, like, these are kind of sometimes the tough situations
That's a
you're
very
in.
tough situation.
Because
But
and that-
making it a department policy, or if they legislate it and becomes a law, then now you have to, and that's your way out. Like, this is why I had to step in, because I don't want to lose my job.
Right.
You put it like that.
Yeah.
So, and that's going to happen. I mean, there's not every cop's the same. Obviously, I'd say 99% of them are, but there's always going to be that one bad apple. That's the guy that's going to get the press and be in the news and be the example for everyone else. So that this is why you have to have policies like this for that 1%.
Right. Yeah, and we were talking about how, obviously the good cops aren't going to make the news, right? And there's
Usually not.
right.
Usually not. They don't.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's tons more cops out there like you, and it's like, of course, when something bad happens, that's going to get the most attention. But at the same time, do you think there's a lot that in the past, at least, has been underreported because maybe, again, it didn't get out, and it's like, how do you know really how many good cops and how many bad cops there are?
Well,
right?
I can only judge from my 27 years. I didn't, see anything really out of line. Now, I worked in a suburban where we had a lot of, but I didn't work in that high volatile, day in day out volatile area. So I didn't see that much that I can remember police officers doing things that way out of line. You know what I mean?
Sure.
The stuff guys got out in trouble where I'm from, it's drinking or womanizing and things like that, off duty stuff.
Okay.
So.
But you're talking about that, again, that volatile situation they're in,
Yeah.
which makes me think that even the ones where they might abuse power, like you were saying, they didn't go in thinking they were going to abuse power.
Right.
But the job wore them down to a point
I'm sure
where
that's
they did.
exactly what happened when you read about where some guy goes overboard. I'm sure that's probably what happened. Can I say for sure? No, but that sounds reasonable. You didn't go in with the idea of being a jerk or overdoing it, and I think guys just snap, And who knows what the personal life is like too. I mean, it's a lot of wear and tear on personal lives. So you get that combination of pressure, work pressure, and home. I could see how things could go south.
Well, I think one of the things that maybe a lot of people don't think about or talk about too is that, for an 8 to 10 to 12 hour time period, you're in a car and you're in the elements. Around here, there's 4 distinct seasons, so it could be minus 12 out, it could be 90 degrees out.
Yeah.
And it's something that, at any moment, you're going to jump out of that car into freezing weather and then have to deal with a really highly volatile situation when you were really comfortable a minute before. And, again, and it could be very physical too. Like 1 minute you're, again, having a cup of coffee, the next minute you're chasing somebody down, right? And,
that's how it goes until these adrenaline spikes. And I mean, that's got to take a physical toll, I would think. You know what I mean?
Have you personally ever suffered any injuries or,
No. One time towards the end of my career, yeah, I got into it. Intox, domestic, and we went to take him into custody. He resisted, and him and I both went down at the same time, and I hit my head on the driveway.
Oh, geez.
Now I felt I think I almost blacked out. I had two other guys with me. They were able to handcuff him, get him secured, and all that stuff. But I think they asked me if I blacked out. I go, I don't think so. I got a little blurry for a second, but then they made me go down to the hospital, and the doctor said I had a concussion, which. I honestly didn't feel, I said, maybe you should go look for the dent in the driveway, but I feel fine. But they made me take 10 days off and I did light
10
duty
days, wow.
well, yeah. And the doctor explained it to me, look, you might be able to work and all that, but you don't want to get an injury on top of this one.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's how he put it. So 10 days.
Concussion protocol.
It was light duty. I still came to work, but you were in the office. Yeah, I guess that's what it would be called.
So this makes me think about how police officers have a number of different hats they wear, right? So you're the first on the scene. You're a cop. You're enforcing the law. You're arresting people, but you're also the grief counselor. And, sometimes you're just trying to keep the peace, right? And so is that asking too much of one person to fulfill all of those different types of roles? I mean,
we managed it somehow, but you're right. We were social worker. We were grief counselor. Some guy's thinking about hurting himself, and you're talking to him. You got addiction issues. You're trying to help people with that sometimes. And point them in the right direction for treatment. And yeah, we did wear a lot of hats. I don't know. We were doing mental hygiene arrests, and it was like up to us to decide whether this guy's coming or not. And it was for. Whether we're going to take away his freedom, really, lack of handcuff him and bring him to the hospital.
Sure.
And for me, it was very black and white. There wasn't a lot of nuance for me, not being that well trained. We had some training, but the guy said he's going to kill himself. I'm not going to take a chance.
Sure.
He might have been just venting, but he's coming. I didn't mean it. Well, you got to come with me.
Sure.
More or less, more times than not, you could talk him into it, and you put me in a bad spot. I got no choice. You got to come with me. But we started towards the end of my career. People from, I think it was Monroe County Office of Mental Health. I think that's where they were from. But they were riding with us, and sometimes they would do follow-ups on MHAs that we did, and we would go with them because some, if the person's volatile or something, we would go with them, and they were doing follow-ups. And so that was kind of a new trend. I thought was a great idea. Not just drop them off at the hospital and see you next time.
Yeah.
They, because some people were regulars, I guess.
Sure.
But they were professionals that were following up. And like one girl I know, she did some work in the Bronx. She had a lot of experience. And she came up here, and she was I was impressed on how concerned she was about these people and how, she really did do follow-up. She was really diligent. So that was starting to come in towards the end of my career. And there was other guys getting trained in what they call it EDP training, so emotionally disturbed person. They had more training than which just our, maybe 8-hour course in service or what we got in the academy. These guys had a little bit more. So, and even on the rundown on the computer, the dispatcher could see in parentheses next to his name EDP. So that would be a guy to call a lot of times that could handle a situation. He might be the one calling in on that.
Yeah. That would make sense in order, I think one of the kind of tenets behind the defund the police was really more about just kind of making departments smaller, but then adding on a bunch of different services in order to complement what the police are already doing. So it would kind of lighten your load when it comes to some things that maybe you weren't trained on compared to somebody who that was their whole career. And so, it sounds like that was something that was kind of happening already, but, again, there's a lot of these buzzwords in the mainstream media, right? Like defund the police, basically meaning that people, when they hear that, it's like, get rid of police departments. And I don't think that's what people are really saying. I think they were kind of saying, okay, let's have everybody be in kind of their lane, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. You need the police to get there first and make sure the scene's secure. You can't send a social worker with her notebook and pencil and not have any sort of protection. It's dangerous. You know what I mean? And instead of cutting back on this police for this unit or this amount of officers, so you can add this, have the same amount of police officers and put the money into it and the social workers. 'Cause these cops are getting overwhelmed now. Just reading in the papers, the violence. We had 81 homicides this year, and we're on. What do we got? 6 or 7 already this year. We're not even in March. I mean, there has to be. You have to have that front line, which is the police officer, and cutting them back, I think, is not fair to the people that live in these neighborhoods and in these cities. It's not fair to them. And crime, and it's not just our cities. It's all across the country.
Sure.
Crime wave, and I my personal opinion, and I got no stats or anything to back it up, but I think it's the lack of, they don't have as many people. They can't get people. They're having trouble recruiting.
Which is interesting, because when we were coming up, it was the exact opposite problem, right?
I
You
was
had to
sitting
get
in
a
the chief's office
99.
with you. You had to get a 99, and then you still might not get a call.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. So, what do you think, are some of the solutions as far as, trying to, like have more your style, as far as, like, I know for a fact that you, knew most people in the community on some
growing
level
up
or
in the
another,
town.
right? You grew up there, and just your style, if you saw someone, you would come say hello, you would, chat them up, that type of thing. And so you really got entrenched in, the community, and people knew you, and they knew not to be, again, different environment, but it's something that I think was, again, breaking that stereotype of, somebody who is just there to enforce the law versus protect and serve, which says right on the side of your car, right? And so, how would you, like, if you had to train people, for example, like, what would you encourage them to do more that you think would help, kind of broach those issues, between
just-
kind of one side versus the other?
You just give respect, get respect. That would be the buzz. But my phrase, give people the respect. And that's what they want. They don't want you talking down to them. Just because we're an authority figure doesn't mean you have to talk down to them.
Sure.
And so that would be it. Just treat people with respect. Whether it's an addict and he just shoplifted and to support his habit, and it's kind of, and he's stealing from his kids. We had one guy took Christmas Eve, took the Christmas presents, sold them. Not a kid's don't have, I mean, that's, but you got to try to put that aside and understand what he's going through, I guess, and try to find a way to show give him his dignity. You know what I mean?
Well, like,
and I think people respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in a case like that, it's like you've got to be in a pretty bad place, right, to do something like that.
These addictions rewire their brain so much they're doing things you could never. They probably never would have thought of before they were an addict.
Of course.
It just rewires the brain somehow. You probably know more about that with your training than I do, but but just approach everything with give people their respect. More times than not, you're going to get positive feedback and cooperation. Even though they're angry, you're giving them their respect. Sometimes you're in their house, show them a little bit of respect. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
But there are those cases where people, like you said, they see the uniform and they're going to have a reaction, right? And I think this is something Todd was talking about as far as, I think that was the reasoning behind sending the social workers, right, to diffuse a situation. And they have their training so that it's not like, here's the cops, and now it's just, like you said, it's a powder keg.
the guy
right?
can blow up. Yeah, I guess that's going to happen. But I'm just not for. I worry about their safety. Sending in a social worker before we know of what kind of weapons are in there, what the whole situation is. At least calm it down, make sure it's safe. You know what I mean?
I mean, one of the approaches could be, we're just here to make sure it's safe, and as soon as we know that, we're out of here, and we got somebody who's going to help.
Yeah, and frankly, you probably don't want to be there anyway. You're like, all right, we good? You got this? And then bye-bye. You know.
And then is that actually on the table as far as like procedure?
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I've been out 2 years now.
Yeah.
So much has changed.
I haven't heard
2 years.
anything about that, but that would make sense to me.
Yeah, that makes
Like,
sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you don't want to cut back the police to add more social workers. Keep your levels here and add social workers.
Yeah.
Because I think, that, like I say, if I live, the people that live in these neighborhoods, I don't think in the violent neighborhoods, they don't want to see less cops. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Not when we've had, I don't know how many in the last few days, people just driving by, shooting up houses. I mean, you imagine living in that neighborhood. You know, so we're the cops. We need the cops to handle this and arrest people. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And get these people off the street that are doing this stuff.
Did you ever have that you can recall nightmares about any situations?
The nightmares I would have would be being in a bad shoot. So I shoot somebody, and it was a bad shoot. You know, they didn't have a gun or anything like that. So yeah, those kind of.
They had a hero sandwich like on Goodfellas.
Yeah,
right?
it was that thing. Like, oh my God! And then you wake up, and you're like, is that a sign? I got to be, you know. The other thing I would because we had computers in the car, you know.
Yeah.
You're constantly looking at that, driving, looking down. They dispatch you calls over the radio, but a lot of it's over here, and they add notes to the job card that they wouldn't put over the air on the computer. So you drive, and I would have dreams that I'm doing that, and then next thing you know, there's tail lights, and I would jump awake and it like breathing heavy. I'm like, oh my God, okay. And so like weeks after that, I was extra careful. You know, I always looked at it as some kind of sort of sign or message or something.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, the reality was you're distracted driving, right?
you're a short order cook. You got someone's going on, you know. Telephone, the computer, the radio. You're just general driving and everything that's going on. And if you're on your way to a call, you're okay. You're getting your game plan before you get there. You know what I mean? And so it's so much happens at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another thing I never really thought about until just now. That in driving so much and kind of being the authority on the road, did you ever kind of feel bulletproof, even though the reality is that your car was just the same as any others, and you could have gotten into an accident and just like any other person, or gotten killed like on a traffic pullover, or just someone slamming into your car?
Yeah, I mean, you were always aware of that. I guess I was a little extra confident in the police car, I guess you could say. They're a nice car. They're fast. They're they just handle so well compared to like the van I drive, which has got almost 200,000 miles on it. You know what I mean? Just going from that to the police car was, it did give you this kind of, especially so powerful. Yeah, I guess you had a little bit. It was fun driving, and I don't know if I felt invincible. I knew my limits, so if I'm going down the expressway to a call from one side of the town to the other, I'm not going to go 110 miles an hour because my driving ability, the car will do that easily, but I don't trust my driving ability. So, I might go 80 or 90. You got to get to the call, right?
Sure.
Well, you're no good if you get in a crash.
Yeah.
So,
did you ever
I
get
drove
any?
to my ability, which I wasn't the greatest driver in the world. You know what I mean?
Really? Okay.
So, I didn't have that confidence. We would do what's called evac. You got to drive through the cones, and we would have a cone course over and you would have to drive through that. And I'm hit, boom, 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 boom. It took me. I never got through my first time, and a lot of it was backing. So, towards the end, again, the newer cars, we started off with Crown Vics, great big back windows, right? Turn around, not too bad. The newer cars, tiny little window like this, and so you got a backup camera in your mirrors. So now you're trying to do it that way. The kids that grew up playing video games, no problem. They're backing through, and you're not only weaving through. You got to do it for a time, so you can't just take your time going through the car.
Sure.
You're doing it for a time, so that's why there's a sense of urgency. And for me, I knew my limitation. I wasn't the great. It took me a few times to go through it because
Well, they transition too to mostly SUVs, right? Like
And now they're driving SUVs. Yeah.
with the big
And again,
grills
there's
on the front where
even
if they
worse.
need to ram somebody or something. right?
or more for because we're out where we work. There's a deer run in front of the looking out and bang, So
Yeah.
more front ends went on police cars from deers than anything else, But those SUVs, there's even less window to see, Out it's mirrors and camera now.
Sure.
So, but you got to know your ability, and I knew
Yeah.
drive within
Yeah.
your drive, like you say, keep in your lane, drive within your ability. Don't go and get in a crash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because that would be like embarrassing.
Well, it's
isn't it?
embarrassing, and there's paperwork, and God forbid you hurt somebody, and
Sure.
you're not making it to the call.
Yeah.
Now you just create a huge headache. So just get to the call.
What,
You got to drive somewhat aggressive, but know your limits.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. What do you think is, maybe I know this might be a tough question, but probably the most disturbing thing that you've ever witnessed on the job for that?
Well, one of more, I don't know if disturbing's it, surreal maybe, was when we had to take, there was a girl, she was a young mom and her baby, brand new baby, and CPS was going to take the baby, and we had to come with them. Actually, I was the only one with that on that call. And taking somebody's kid and her just crying on the couch, that was surreal. Like I'm an arm of the government, and we just took somebody's kid, you know what I mean, out of the house. That was surreal, And there's a reason. It takes a lot to get a child removed from. So
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
sure it was justified, and there were drugs and stuff involved. She couldn't just shake that habit, and CPS came and took the kid, and of course we went along with it. It was such a brand new baby. It was one of those backward facing car seats. I actually carried the baby out
Yeah.
on the and that
Wow.
that was surreal. That one kind of hit home. Like, wow, we just took somebody's kid, So that was disturbing, we had the incident on Christmas Eve, or Christmas Eve incident,
Yes.
where 4 people got shot, 2 got killed. A third, there was 3 people actually dead in
Yeah.
that whole mess.
Can you break that down for the viewers? Because a lot of people may not have known what happened, and also, it's something that at the time was live on CNN. I mean, this was a big deal.
Yeah, it was a big thing. So I wasn't working. I was home, but guy had gotten out of prison, not even paroled. He had done a manslaughter, which had killed his grandmother, back in the 80s. Killed her with a hammer, and he got convicted, and they gave him 25 years, and he did every day that 25 years. And when he got out, there was no parole. He was free and clear, And so he moves back home. Well, everything had been. The mother had passed away that owned the house over there on the outlet, and she gave the power of attorney and everything to her daughter, this guy's sister.
Okay.
And when Mom died, the sister was going to sell the place, and he wasn't having that.
Okay.
So he killed her and set the house on fire, which in turn the houses are very close together. Set 4 houses on fire, 4 or 5, something like that. The police show up, when as the police, we just get there and we kind of clear traffic for the fire trucks. And as the fire trucks started arriving, he was on the other side behind a berm shooting. And shooting at the fire trucks. And so the guys got out of the truck. Well, first you hear the pop, 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 pop. And then people thought ammo was going off in the houses that were on fire. And then when firemen started dropping, they knew they were getting shot at,
God.
And so one of the officers on scene went back and got his rifle, started shooting towards this guy. And when bullets started coming his way, he actually took his own life. But we lost 2 firemen, one of which was my lieutenant as a police officer. He was a volunteer fireman, and then 2 other guys went to the hospital. So, it was that might be one of the more, I guess, things that you'll never forget.
Sure.
I came into work the next day, but everything had been said and done at that point. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't involved in the incident itself.
Were you watching it on TV or like
No.
people giving you updates?
I got a phone call. I just got a phone call.
Okay.
So
What was that like for the department to go in? Like you said, he was your lieutenant,
yeah,
and now
well,
he's
and
gone.
he another guy that grew up in town too.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult, you know. Like the community came together though. I'll tell you, we had never felt so much love came from the community for us and for the fire department. And we had food like stacked to the ceiling. People were sending us trays and stuff, and I'll never forget that. And this was at a time when the town was considering getting rid of the police department and because we have a county sheriff office could cover. People arguing, well, why would you paying all this money for our own police department when the county can cover it? You know, not all the towns where we are in the county are covered by police. They have the county covered. So that was the big debate, and there was petitions going around and things like that. So they had to get enough petitions to get the town board to vote on it. And if the town board voted, they have to send it back to the town, and you have to get more than 51% once the town board agrees to bring it to a vote. And so they would have had to got over 50% of the town to say, yeah, let's let the county abolish the police department. And when they saw how much support we had, that was right when this incident happened. They dropped the whole thing because they knew we're not going to get 50% of people to boot us out. You know what I mean? So that's how much. You know, and I'll never forget that. So we had the funeral up at the high school, all the way down Ridge Road to the graveyard, which was on gravel road. It was freezing cold that day, but there was people lining the Ridge Road all the way down there, and like 4 people deep, and all the way down, all the miles of it. You know, flags and all this stuff. So,
But these are some of the, you know, that's obviously an extreme story, but you
really
know, the
extreme.
risks of being a first responder, right? So did you ever have thoughts that, you know, this could be my last day when you walked out the house? Or
yeah,
did you?
I never. Oh yeah, you know, you never walk away mad from the wife or anything like that. You know, you're always telling. You know, you don't want your last words to be angry or something. Yeah, that always thought that this could be my last day. That was always sure. So.
Yeah, well, there's just an inherent danger.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. You just never know.
Sure, but
So.
I mean, it's one thing if you're an accountant, but if another thing, if you know you're dealing with the public.
This is true. Although I would recommend, if whoever's listening, if you're an accountant or whatever, still don't leave the house, man. You never
Yeah.
know if it's your last day. You could get in a car accident.
That's true.
You know. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, that was very much aware of this could be it, and you know, anything could happen, and so I, you know.
did you feel? And this may sound like a really stupid question, but like, what were your feelings when you retired? As far as did you feel like you made it through? Like it was a
Yes.
sense of accomplishment and also
Absolutely.
relief, maybe that
A relief and an accomplishment, everything.
Mm-hmm.
My timing, I don't think, could have been more perfect as far as when I left. Again, it was before COVID. It was only months before all the violence and the riots, and we even had demonstrations in our town. And so before all this negative stuff on the police, and just I saw a YouTube video, one of the guys at a protest rally, and people are in their face yelling and calling them vile names and stuff, and that's not who they are. They're not the racist. They're not this. They're just not. But they were getting people screaming in their face, and they had to just sit there and take it, and that was tough to watch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Do you think you could have done that?
I could have stood there and took it,
Yeah.
sure. But again, I don't take it personal. But it's still, when you're seeing your friend, that happening to people you know are good people, and they're just sitting there taking it's tough watching your friend take that too.
Sure. Well, that's another one of those no-win situations, right? Because you either
Yeah.
take it,
Right.
and that sucks,
Yeah,
or you
could
push
just-
back, but then
Yeah.
it's one of those
You're
things.
just going to blow things up. If you
Self-fulfilling
push
prophecy.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You just
exactly.
gotta- and a lot of our guys now. One of the things I saw in the paper, all these guys standing there in the shields, and I said sheriff department. But if you look at their shoulder patch, there was other towns there. They all had sheriff department shields, but there was other agencies downtown helping out. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So
What was your, kind of preconceptions of the job, and then after exiting, how much did that line up with reality? Versus kind of what you thought it was going to be like.
well, and we did ride-alongs and stuff as kids. I had guys who were nice enough to take me out, even as a, when I was thinking about getting in the job, and I thought it would be just running from call to call and excitement and all this and that. What it turns out is you get bogged down with a lot of work, and like we're a smaller department where I'm from, we do a lot of our own investigation. Patrol does their own investigations. We're a bigger department. You could kick up a burglary, for instance. You take a really good cover report, get all the detail, kick it up to an investigator.
Mm-hmm.
Where in my world, it was yours.
Mm-hmm.
You took it. You followed that stolen credit card across the county, and you interviewed people, and you did your own investigation, all the while answering calls on the radio. So it was hectic, and I guess that was part of some of the stuff I was getting tired of doing. Just the hecticness. We were getting busy. We were small. The towns grew a lot.
Sure.
The police department's still the same size. So you're handling a lot more volume of calls, and you're doing your investigation. So I got, I don't know, I guess if I was a younger guy, it'd be a lot of fun, but as an older guy, I just started getting tired of it. So I knew it was time to go. So, but that's the difference, going from fun, like watching cops and it's just one call to the other, chasing people and hood slide like the Dukes of Hazzard or something.
TJ Hooker.
Yeah, TJ Hooker.
Yeah.
They call him Captain. He's got sergeant stripes on. Captain Hooker. He's got sergeant stripes.
But the reality was that a lot of times you were in your car doing paperwork for hours.
A lot of it, and just in the office and making phone calls and leaving town to go handle calls, and and then there was always people you knew growing up and stuff you had to arrest. That would always be kind of a little on the awkward side, but again, you could treat them with the dignity and respect, and don't let them be embarrassed. They're embarrassed because you know them and they know you.
Sure. And
you knew each other growing up, but don't make them feel like an idiot. You know what I mean? Try to be compassionate, and that sort of took the edge off of that part, uncomfortableness.
All right, Chuck. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'd like to ask our viewers if they think Chuck has helped break the stereotype they have of cops. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more interviews that break stereotypes.